I now request Devashish Basu, Trustee of Moneylife Foundation, to introduce Mr. Wajahat Habibullah, please.
Good afternoon. I have the immense pleasure of introducing our honored guest today, Mr. Wajahat Habibullah. In October 2005, Mr. Habibullah was appointed the Chief Information Commissioner just when the idea of the right to information was being implemented. He was a CIC for 5 years till September 2010 when the RTI movement took shape and real momentum. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Mr. Habibullah.
It's a pleasure for me to come and talk to you about a subject which is, of course, much discussed in the country. And I shall try to contribute my might in furthering this discussion, which, as I can see, is following an extremely positive and constructive path. I happen to be at the inaugural of the convention, the 6th annual convention of the National Central Information Commission yesterday, and was therefore I therefore heard the speech of the Prime Minister, which has become the subject of so much discussion in the media, in the press, and even at the political level. And I think that we can certainly share ideas on what was discussed in that meeting, and also other discussions and arguments that have been put forward for and against the Right to Information Act. The Right to Information Act and its implementation have in fact given birth to the entire Lokpal movement. And therefore, the future of this law, the way forward, is in my view something of importance for the country as a whole. Now, I will make a presentation which I hope will cover the basics, which will chart a map. It will not give you final answers. It will only talk to you about how the Act has actually been working and what I would wish for you to focus on. Then we go on to actually discussing the details. Now, these are the words of President Barack Obama when he actually took over as President of the United States. A democracy requires accountability, and accountability requires transparency. As Justice Louis Brandeis wrote, and this is of course a very famous saying, sunlight is said to be the best of disinfectants. In our democracy, the Freedom of Information Act, which by the way is an act not as strong as ours, which encourages accountability through transparency, is the most prominent expression of a profound national commitment to ensuring an open government. At the heart of that commitment is the idea that accountability is in the interest of the government and the citizenry alike. In order to emphasize that last line, this is not a law, and I've said this repeatedly, this is not a law which is a weapon against the government, as it has sometimes been described to be, fortunately less and less. It is a means of strengthening governance, not a means of eroding it. I'll give you another quotation. This, of course, is from the law itself. Democracy requires an informed citizenry and transparency of information which are vital to its functioning, and also to contain corruption and to hold governments and their instrumentalities accountable to the governed. This is the gist of the law. And of particular reference to our country, with its high poverty levels, is this quote from Kofi Annan, the former Secretary General, as we all know, of the UN. The great democratizing power of information has given us all the chance to effect change and alleviate poverty in ways we cannot even imagine today. Our task, your task, is to make that change real for those in need, wherever they may be. With information on our side, with knowledge of a potential for all, the path to poverty can be reversed. I would like you to remember the origins of this law in our country. The law came into being as a result of the efforts of some persons to work for the effective implementation of the poverty alleviation programs. That is what led to this law coming up from below. It is not something that was imposed on the people from above. And that, I think, is the beauty of this law. So when reviewing it, when reviewing its performance, it's important to remember that is it serving that purpose? It is satisfying those who were in fact responsible for its birth. And this was the Prime Minister's speech in presenting this bill to Parliament, acknowledging what I have said thus far, that I believe that the passage of this bill will see the dawn of a new era in our processes of governance, an era of performance and efficiency, an era which will ensure that benefits of growth flow to all sections of our people. And finally, an era which will truly fulfill the hopes of the founding fathers of our republic. Now, the question is, the benefits of this act are for whom? See the development of our country. Has the infrastructure come up to the levels as we expect it to come up to, despite privatization? What has happened to employment growth, which was 2.1% in 1983-04 and came down to 1983 and came down to 1.84% in 2004. Is Narega the answer? How is it working? What of the health services provided to the people? How far are regional, socio-economic, caste and gender differences leading to disparities? The centre and state fiscal relations. How is the money, which is the public money, being spent, and what is it being spent on? Public-private partnership is another major issue. The Prime Minister mentioned it in his speech also yesterday. Does the privatization of government work or government industry mean that the organization no longer remains accountable? And if it's still within government, is it accountable enough? The question of access to justice. The courts have been very active in actually promoting the RTI Act, in many ways even more than the information commissions. I know certainly that the Delhi High Court has been. But has this made access to justice available to all? Then the question arises, and you yourselves have been witness to this. Has national security been compromised by the right to information law? Or, in November the 11th, had there been better access of information, would that have been more effective? So the question arises as to whether national security overrides social security and individual freedom, or in fact, does the strengthening of individual freedom and social security lead to the increase of national security? This is the definition of information, and I've emphasized towards the end, you don't know the definition, but I've emphasized at the end, any private body which can be accessed by a public authority under any other law for the time being in force. And a ruling under this clause, we found that schools, cooperatives, all set up in the private sector, all of them actually come under this act. They can be asked for information, but the information has to be asked for through the government department, which has this access. And this is not only the kind of information which is already available with the government department. If it can be accessed, which can be accessed, that means even if that is not available with the government department, but is available with a particular private institution, then that can be called for by an individual applying to a particular organization. Now, these are key concepts, therefore. Transparency and accountability, I've told you. But the right of any citizen of India to request access to information and the corresponding duty of government to meet the request, except, of course, the exempted information, which is Sections 8 and Section 84. Section 8 defines the exempted information, as you know. Section 24 keeps some organizations out of the purview of the Act. And this is important. It is a duty of government to proactively make available key information to all. Section 4. I have for a long time held that if this clause is fully implemented and effectively, then much of the problem which government departments complain of, the work is too much, we don't find time for anything else. I don't, of course, agree that that is so. But even if it were so, the way to overcome it is through proactively making available information to all under Section 8, under Section 4.1b, and computerizing your records so that access to that information becomes easy. This is happening, but to a very limited extent. And, if I may say so, this brings about a responsibility on all sections, not only on government, citizenry, NGOs, and media. These are all responsible. All are part of this. I don't really need to have to explain this to you because so many of you are representing